All right, welcome to the show. Today we got a good friend of mine here as a guest, Shane. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You got an exciting little space going on, and I'm excited to be on.
Yeah, thank you. I'd say let's just get right into it. We got a good topic today.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty big topic and a really important one in my mind, at least. The pursuit of happiness. For you, do you find that you're like deliberately trying to pursue happiness? And if you are trying to pursue happiness and like intentionally trying to structure your life to make it more happier, what are those things that you think you're doing to try to structure it? Like, are you maybe trying to get that money, like trying to get that clout on Instagram, or like trying to achieve certain goals? What do you think it is that you try to do to pursue a more happier life?
Yeah, so definitely, of course, everyone wants to be a lot happier.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a pursuit that I'm trying to make a more deliberate effort into finding that happiness. And one thing that a technique that I've implemented is, I don't know how else to describe it, but a stool. So you know how a stool has like 3 legs?
Yeah.
And there's kind of 3 pillars to happiness in my mind.
Okay.
First being your health.
Yeah.
Second being your finances, and your third being your relationships. So obviously health is really important. If you're exercising, if you're eating healthy, and you aren't, like diagnosed with a debilitating disease.
Yeah.
Those kind of things will make you happy. Like, of course, if I get sick, I'm going to be sad.
Right.
And the second is like finance, right? You want to be able to afford going on trips with your family.
Yeah.
Going to restaurants with your friends.
Right.
The third is your relationship. So like maintaining a healthy relationship with your mother and your father, your husband, your wife, your friends.
Yeah.
Those 3 things I kind of check myself on. Like, am I being healthy? Am I being a good friend? Am I saving my money? And I feel like those 3 things can lead to a happy life. And if you're lacking on one of these stools or one of these legs of the stool, you're a little imbalanced, right?
Right.
Like, if have a lot of money and I'm working out a bunch, I'm in great shape, but I don't have a good relationship with my friends, I might not be the happiest person.
Right.
And of course, like, the level of finance changes each person, right? Some people want more money, some people want less money.
Yeah.
So it is person to person, but that 3-pillar thing is something that I've recently like implemented it in my life, and I feel like it's leading to a happier life for me.
Yeah, those 3 things definitely are key, and it is hard to live a happy life without any one of those. In my mind, it's not necessarily that those 3 will guarantee your happiness, but they will remove a lot of unhappiness from your life. Like, that's how I look at money is especially money, where like it's not necessarily going to guarantee that you're going to be happy, but it's going to solve a lot of your problems. And in solving a lot of those problems, it's going to remove a lot of sources for you being unhappy and discontent with things. And with the health one, I think health should for sure be a priority for everybody, because even if you have a lot of money and you have a lot of good relationships, health, I feel like can sink the whole ship. You know what I mean? Like, and I guess any one of them, like you were saying, you lose one of the legs and the stool collapses. But I find, especially with health, if your health were to decline, your quality of life would go down, I mean, pretty significantly. And it might take a while for you to get used to the reduction in quality of life. And that's one thing, too, that if you're used to a certain level of quality or certain level of, pretty much quality in your life, and then that gets reduced, that can be a significant source of unhappiness.
You see like a lot of like professional athletes, like as they age, they'll get like sadder because they aren't able to achieve the same feats that they had prior. And like, that can be like a really sad thing. And it's kind of like strange, like, oh, I'm getting weaker and there's nothing I can do about it. That could be like so demoralizing.
Right.
But I don't know, like, you can't hold too much weight to...
I'll just move the mic a little bit.
You can't hold too much weight to health, I feel like. I feel like you have to balance those 3 things. And you're right, finance certainly isn't the most important. Like, you can live a happy life with next to no money. Right? You have people living in vans, right? Like these tiny homes and all that. They're more than happy, right? They're content with their life. That's their level of finance.
Yeah.
That their stool is at this level.
Right.
But yeah, health is definitely important, and it can, if you aren't making healthy choices, it deliberately affects your relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you aren't sleeping enough, you're cranky with your friends or your boss, and if you aren't eating the best things, you might be like irritable when you start your workday.
Right. Yeah. For you, has that been something that like, or rather, when did you maybe start to try to more deliberately make happiness something that you're trying to achieve? Like, was it always something that you were purposely going after, or have you more recently been trying to make shifts in your life to make it a happier experience?
Yeah, it's fairly recent. There was a time when COVID first started, I was working a bunch.
Yeah.
I was getting super stressed out with my job. One of my coworkers left the team for another thing, and I had to take on a lot more work.
Right.
And I was super, super stressed, and I was letting it affect all aspects of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, I had this moment, and I was like, why am I coming into work each day? Am I doing this to increase the profit margins of the company I work for?
Yeah,
I'm spending all this effort and time for that. I'm kind of no, this isn't, I shouldn't hold this much weight on my job. I shouldn't let it stress and affect my relationships.
No.
And when I realized that, I was like, hey, I got to take care of myself first. And that moment was like a eureka moment. It was almost like I was embarrassed.
Mm-hmm.
I lived 24 years of my life holding so much weight of my self-worth into this job I had. And I realized you need to improve your relationship with myself in order for me to be happy. So after that, I changed a lot of aspects with my life, like eating healthier, exercising more, and reaching out to friends and talking with them about things like this, right? It improves your relationship. So that moment when I was super stressed at work, that was when it kind of kicked in.
Yeah, and it sucks that you'll reflect back on that and say, I spent 24 years kind of not with my, not spending time on the things that matter. But I feel like that's the way that it has to happen. It's when the discontent piles up enough that you finally realize wow, I shouldn't be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Or when you get to the point where you're feeling so bad about how there's no meaning in the work that you're doing, and probably, I don't know if you can say if you've thought about this, but I've definitely thought about this with my work, where you think about the amount of hours that you are spending there, and it's not necessarily the most meaningful stuff that you're doing. And then you reflect back on the bigger picture of your whole life and think that I'm spending maybe a quarter of my total hours doing this thing that isn't super meaningful to me.
Yeah.
And if you were saying, you were holding it to a high regard and you're like, this, I need to focus more on this.
Yeah.
And maybe you're saying I should be working overtime. I should be putting in more hours.
I was doing that. Yeah.
And yeah, I think what happens is you lose sight of the bigger picture of what you really want to get out of life. And in my mind, one of the best markers for a successful life is how much peace and how much happiness you've had. And with that being said, then you kind of want to structure your life to provide you with more peace and happiness. And what are those things? It's like you were saying, it's the stuff for the legs of the stool, the relationships, the finance, and the physical health. So for you personally, have those been the main three things that if you focus on those, you seem to be happier and better off?
Yeah, I definitely health, and I think the relationships are the most important. There was a point, I was taking a walk down Wellington one day, and I saw two kinds of people. I was seeing a trend. I saw people with their loud sports car, revving their engine down the street.
Right.
And then I would see families going on walks.
Right.
And I was like, what kind of person do I want to be when I grow up? Do I want to have the Lamborghini driving that down, or do I want to have a stroller with a kid in it?
Right.
And
could you have both?
You could have both, but what are you going to find more happiness in? A child or a car?
For most people, it will be the child.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, some big car guys out there though.
Oh, that's true. Like their car
know.
is their child, right? They're working
Yeah,
at it all the time.
pretty
but
much. That's their child. That's their wife. That's their everything. They love it. But yeah, that's one thing too. It definitely varies the things that are gonna make you happy, and when you see one person getting really happy about their sports car, another person getting really happy about maybe they won first place in like a spelling bee or something, and like they just really really love trying to be the best speller they can, or maybe they're trying to be an Olympic kayaker, whatever it is. I'm just trying to think of some random things, but like you might look at their thing and be like, nah, I'm not doing that. That won't make me happy. But like you're saying though, I think there are things that in general humans do require, relationships being one of them, and on average probably a child will make most people more happy, but there definitely is some variances there where some people just, they're not going to be quite as they're not going to be quite as satisfied with the same things that other people are.
And that's what makes life interesting, right? There is no key to happiness.
Yeah,
there's no like, I can't say like, oh, getting like an old Honda Accord and souping up the engine is the key to happiness.
No.
It changes from person to person. Right?
Yeah.
I was maybe like ignorant in my, like in the past, like thinking that like LeBron James, a guy like him who wakes up every morning with a singular focus of being the best basketball player he can be.
Yeah.
Like that's such an enviable thing. Like it's such a defined and clear purpose.
Yeah.
And I've realized like recently, like, hey, like not every single person can find that single pursuit of happiness, like that one thing that makes them happy. And I think most people don't feel that way. Like, I don't know if you have something, a singular thing that makes you happy. Like
no.
a clear purpose. Is it this podcast? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this podcast definitely provides me with some, it's a meaningful goal for me to pursue. And for what I've heard, and if I reflect back on my experience, I see this as true, is that a lot of the positive emotions that you're going to get in your life are from pursuing goals and getting feedback as you're on the path towards that goal, that you're like headed towards the goal. But it's not necessarily in achieving the goal itself. And then there's oftentimes you hear stories about people being depressed after they finally achieve the thing that they wanted to do. Have you ever had that where like you finally, I don't know, like you really wanted to pass a course, or like you really wanted to achieve something, and finally once you do it, you're like, well, now what do I do? Like, what do I do now?
Exactly, right? So the goalposts are always moving in life, right?
Yeah.
You're in high school, and my kind of motivation for studying was like, oh, okay, I got to get into a respectable school and a respectable program.
Yeah.
So,
and who defined respectable for you?
I kind of defined it myself.
Yeah.
Like you would study all this time in high school to get into these programs, and then once I got in, I was kind of like, okay, what's next? Now I got to get good grades. There was no end. There was no like achievement there. So I go and I get good grades, and then I got to get a good job, and then I got to get a new house. The goalposts are always moving. There was never like, oh, this eureka moment. I wasn't like super satisfied when I got my diploma at graduation.
Right.
The goalposts always are moving in life.
Yeah. And it's like once you do get it, I've had that especially with when I feel like I almost always need to set up some sort of goal that I'm chasing, otherwise I feel like discontent. And I've had moments like that where I've maybe signed up for like a race that I want to do, just something to keep me occupied, like a goal that I'm continually trying to work towards. And then once you finish the race, it's like, fuck, well, what am I going to do now? And I think that's part of the reason why I started doing this podcast, just because, yeah, you're going to work, and that provides you with maybe some meaning and something that you can work towards. Maybe you want to rise the ranks or whatever it is, but I felt like I needed some sort of like another goal on the side to be pursuing, something that was more like my personal thing. I can craft it in whatever way I want. And that provided me with some more meaning. And I wanted to ask you about, I know you mentioned seeing those people with the stroller.
Yeah.
Classic Wellington Street, I guess, just Lamborghinis or strollers. But one thing that I've noticed that I have a tendency to do, and I think it leads me to more unhappiness, is that you'll maybe see people wherever it is, walking down the street or whatever, and a lot of the time it's unconscious, I think, but there'll be judgments kind of made towards people. And I think that in itself can lead to more unhappiness, because I like the idea that if you can be happy for more like other people, a lot of other people, then that now provides you with so many more things to be happy with in life.
Mm-hmm.
And because you could picture some people that are like maybe highly selfish and they're only considering what they about themselves, and so if things are going bad in their life, they have no other sources that could potentially bring them up. But if you try, and I'm trying to do this, it doesn't always come naturally, because like I was saying, judging people is maybe a pretty common thing that people do unconsciously. But if you're intentionally trying to be happy for other people's achievements, or whatever they're doing, you see people smiling and laughing in the park, and you're happy about that. I feel like that if you're able to do that, it can provide you with more sources to feel happy. Do you
You're
feel
right.
that, or?
Yeah, it's definitely like an outlook change that people can have. Like you can go and judge someone in a negative way and be like, oh, like look down on them, or you can be like, oh, this person achieved some success, so can I. You can be inspired by that.
Yeah.
And you see these people in the park laughing, you're like, hey, maybe I'm gonna go and invite my friends to hang out in the park one day.
Right.
And yeah, that's a good point. Like you shouldn't really evaluate yourself against others, right?
Yeah, I think it's a natural thing, because people are very, very competitive, and it's almost like a human nature thing, is that you're going to be competitive, and I don't know, this culture especially, people are competitive and they're trying to strive to the top. And there is some good in the competitiveness. It brings out the best in people sometimes, and people are trying their hardest. But I feel like one downside that kind of comes along with the competitiveness is that you're always going to be looking at other people and potentially maybe like being critical of them or judging them, because if you're competitive and you want to win, there's a couple ways to win, but essentially to win you need to beat other people, right?
Yeah, it's a zero-sum game.
Yeah, and to beat other people, you can in your mind maybe shoot them down so that you feel better about yourself. And so I feel like competitiveness can sometimes drag that thought and that approach to life along with it, and lead you to kind of be judging other people. But as a result, you're missing out on being happy when other people do things well.
Yeah, no, it is true. Like maybe these, like, I've never really thought too much about it. Like these ultra competitive people who look at their peers and judge them, are they happier or sadder? Right? If they're constantly comparing themselves to others.
It definitely isolates you, because if you're like always judging other people, it kind of puts you on a bit of an island, especially if you're judging everybody and you're like, these guys aren't on my level. Now you are mentally on an island, and that's an isolating thing, and that's where you're probably missing out on what you were saying, one of the legs of the stool, the relationships.
Yeah.
Because you're being so competitive and you're always trying to beat everybody. And yeah, because of that, you're gonna socially isolate yourself, and it comes from, I think what it comes from is you get a little bit of like your ego gets a sense of like a good feeling, right? When you judge somebody, that's kind of why you're gonna be judgmental of other people, is because for a moment when you are shooting them down, it gives you a sense of superiority that feels a little bit good, right?
Yeah, like you see, like that's what like Twitter is, right? You have these people who are sitting around on their phone and they're like shooting down these celebrities.
Yeah.
It's like, where are you coming from with this? Like, why are you judging them? And it just goes to show, like, these people are isolated. They have like they don't have these people to like reach out to and talk to. Back to like the competitiveness thing and sharing like other people's success. I like to think a lot of my friends' successes, I kind of get a big sense of that. Like too, when they succeed, I feel like happy for them. Or a team, right? Like a friend group is a team.
Yeah.
Right? You guys are working.
I actually see that in you for sure, actually, because, and that's generally a sign of a good friend, when like you see them being genuinely happy when you do something well. So yeah, shout out to you.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like, man, it's such a, COVID's really taught me one thing, and it's how much I love my friends. I've been far more, because I haven't been able to see them all as much, I've been able to recognize how happy they make me. I'm so grateful to have these wonderful people who like challenge me, make me laugh, make me happy.
Right.
And that is like a big sense of joy for me. Are my friends. It's that relationship peg of the stool. It's like COVID's made me realize like, oh, like I haven't been able to have these interactions as much. And one thing like I always like go back to is when I like reflect on my life, I don't remember the times where I'm by myself, right? You never remember when you're studying for like a math exam. Like all that just gets blocked out of your memory.
Yeah.
When you think back of a memory in 2018 or like any other time, it's generally something you did with your friends. And so like going forward, I want to maximize those things as much as possible. Like I want to see my friends win. I want to see my success with them. Like I want everyone to go up. And it's cool like recognizing that you have a group of people that are on Team Ollie. Like when you started this podcast, I was pumped for you. Like you have this new outlet that can make you happy, and it's COVID's taught me like, oh, I have a group of people that also feel the same way about me, that want me to succeed.
Yeah, no, that's definitely key, and that's an amazing thing, and I for sure see that you genuinely are like that. And I was just thinking like if you if you rise to the top in whatever area, but you do it by yourself, that's gonna be a path to misery. And I feel like especially because you maybe were putting on all this work, and you're like, once I get there, once I get all that money, once I get that Lamborghini, I'm gonna drive down Wellington Street and like, yeah, just fire up the engine.
Yeah.
And you maybe have this dream in your mind, and you're like, that's gonna be amazing. I'm gonna flex on all these people walking by in their strollers. But you finally get there, and then it's you by yourself driving your Lamborghini.
Yeah.
And that might be even more depressing than, just because you expected it to lead you to happiness. And then now you're by yourself, and now your expectation was wrong.
Yeah, like the finance aspect of like that stool that I'm talking about. Like I want to earn enough money that I can like have like a nice, like I don't know, like a cottage or a house where I can host my friends. That's the reason why I want to do it. Like I don't want a cottage. I don't want a big old house just so I can like, I don't know, like yell at my butler for bringing out the wrong bottle of Merlot. Right? You want your friends to be in that house with you. You want a family around you. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I did want to mention, actually, you brought up how being happy for your friends is something that makes you happy. And obviously there's some people out there where you maybe could tell that they're maybe a little bit unhappy, or they're not satisfied when other people are succeeding. You'll for sure see this on the internet, where like other people, maybe they're doing well, and then you get like a whole pile of comments just hating on this person. And I think, and let me know what you think, but I feel like what's happening there a lot of the time is kind of the little ego boost that people are trying to get. And I think that's what happens in general with criticisms and judgments, is that if you're trying to shoot somebody down, like maybe they did something well, but then you have the comment of like, yeah, they're good at that, but like I'm sure they're not so good at this. Like you might see like a smiling, like happy relationship, and you're like, yeah, sure, but like I bet like they're fighting all the time. Like, and the reason you're doing that though is because that provides you with like a little, it's a defense mechanism essentially.
They're insecure, right?
Yeah. And knowing that, I feel like is something that helps. If let's say you see somebody do that to you and they're not so happy, you generally know where it's coming from, right? And if you know that it's coming from their insecurity, maybe you don't have to be so upset about it. You know what I mean? You'd be like, oh, I know why they're doing that. It's not necessarily like they're just you don't necessarily hate them for it. It's just they have their own insecurities, and it's a common human thing. Like I'm sure, and I'm trying to catch myself more often doing it, but I definitely do that, where you'll be judging somebody or be like, yeah, sure, they're good at that, but like maybe they're not good at this, and it's just the whole comparison game, and it's very, very common, but you kind of realize where it's coming from, and I feel like that's the key to stopping it in yourself. Yeah, is to recognize, okay, why did I even have that judgment? Where was that coming from? And yeah, usually it comes back to okay, it's because I'm insecure, and then you can solve the real problem. But I find what happens a lot of the time is you'll end up rationalizing as to why you said that. You're like, no, I'm not actually insecure. It's because they really are like that. Like the rationalizations and the like self-deception you can do is pretty intense.
You can definitely like mask a lot of your problems that you find within yourself. Like people, I don't think take the time to be introspective to understand why they feel certain ways.
Right.
Like if those people who are like constantly shooting people down stopped and like, why am I always being so negative? Why am I highlighting other people's flaws instead of recognizing their positive aspects? Right. Like if they just made that flip, that switch of just like being grateful for other people, being like, I think like more people need empathy. I feel like there's so much a lack of empathy that's going on in the world at the moment. I feel like people were more empathetic and tried to understand other people's positions, then we'd be a far better place. Like if people on Twitter, I always think back to the moment, and this is kind of sad, when Chrissy Teigen had a miscarriage.
Right.
This woman had lost a child, and people on Twitter are shitting on her.
Yeah.
Like they're making fun of her. If people were just empathetic and realized like, oh my God, she's going through a really tough moment right now, we should lay off her and not highlight this negative moment, then they would be far more happier. If they were able to like support her in that moment, then it would lead to them being able to recognize the positive aspects in their life.
Right.
Like negativity leads to more negativity, and positivity leads to more positivity. I feel like.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. And it's, I feel like the harder route though, because what's probably happening with those people on Twitter when they see Chrissy Teigen had a miscarriage, they maybe get a little bit of excitement and they're like, oh, great.
Oh my God, that's so fucked.
It is really messed up. But the thing is, if they're really criticizing her, that might be what they're experiencing, because maybe their life is in shambles, or maybe there's things that they're not content with in their life.
Yeah, exactly.
So when they see, oh, Chrissy Teigen, this girl who's very successful, she's got that problem. For some, like you're saying, it's a bit of like a messed up, dark. It's a dark reason. I mean, obviously, it's very common, so it's a lot of people are doing it. It's not something that is it's reasonable if you see where they're coming from. But yeah, that is where it's coming from, is their own discontent with their own life. Yeah. So instead of taking the harder path of trying to be more empathetic and maybe pursuing, maybe they're missing all three legs of that stool, or maybe they're missing two of them. Instead of taking the time to do all of that, they'll just criticize other people and hope that other people's legs of their stools gets knocked out of the way, so then they don't feel so bad about having only one leg.
And you're right, like people always want to take the path of least resistance. They want the quick fix. They want to put someone down to make them temporarily happier. And that leads to a lot of people trying to find happiness in these quick fixes, these self-help books, this online course, right?
Yeah.
And I think like and we've talked about this in the past, that I think it's such like I have so many issues with these like self-help books that people push out. I feel like it's so, I don't know, now I'm reflecting, like we talked about being judgmental, and I'm judging these people who are making these books. But in the past, I felt like, oh, they're not doing it to make these people happy. They're doing it to make money.
Yeah.
But that's just me being negative now that I think about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could be, because I know people obviously, like we were saying with that, there's that one Mark Manson book. So many people bought it. And if you look at the reviews, a lot of people are claiming that they got a lot of benefits from it. And I actually started reading a little bit of that book, and it seemed decent. But yeah, again, like, let's say you personally find those books to be, I mean, I guess lacking like deeper content, but a lot of people read those and they get a boost in their quality of life. No harm in that, really.
Exactly, right? So, no harm, no foul. you can definitely, if you find inspiration or happiness in anything, great, right?
Yeah.
As long as you're not putting anyone down, cool, that's fine. But I don't like the deception that comes with a lot of these online courses and
Oh, for sure. There's
books.
a lot. Yeah.
These people are promising happiness in a 300-page book.
Yeah.
Like the key to happiness is in that, and I feel like that's really disingenuous.
Right.
These online courses that are thousands of dollars. You have the people who are at the lowest of lows and are very desperate to find happiness, and maybe you're like taking out loans to go to this course. And I feel like a lot of these people know that, and that's why they charge such a high price for it. And I feel like that's like just wrong. If you have the key of happiness, why are you charging money for it?
Right.
Like, why are you putting that behind a paywall? If you truly believe this is how someone can be happy, fucking share it publicly for everyone. Everyone should be happy. You shouldn't be holding this back from people.
Right. Yeah.
But at the same time, get your bag. Like, you need to, you need money. You need that.
Get that bag.
Stool. But at the expense of these desperate people, you shouldn't be doing that.
I think it depends on like how you're marketing it in a way. Like if you're realizing that a lot of people have, I don't know, psychological things that you can prey on. Maybe you notice that they have a lack of like relationships, or they're really desperate for finances, and then you market your whole thing to kind of perfectly fit their insecurities, because that's what a lot of advertisement is you're looking at what are people's insecurities, and then I'm going to say that my product is going to solve those insecurities. But I feel like a lot of it comes down to like how you're actually marketing it too. Like if you're just straight up saying what it is, or you're kind of being a little bit deceptive in the product. But yeah, some of those courses being like thousands of dollars or $500.
That's criminal, I feel.
Yeah, it is pretty tough, because a lot of the time I feel like what those courses do is they want to get you hooked to their next course.
Yeah, the
you know
next
what I mean?
one. That's what I kind of felt with like that Mark Manson book, is the fact that he has a lot of books.
Yeah.
He had like that big hit, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and guess what? 2 years later, he signed a new record or new book deal and put out another one.
Right.
Just like, oh, really? Like it took you within like a year, you were able to write another 300-page book about the key to happiness?
Yeah.
Like, no.
Like he might have some good points in there, but I feel like with a lot of these self-help books is that really the 300 pages could be dialed down to like 20 pages.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that the content in there is bad. I mean, obviously it depends on the book, but let's say his is good. Maybe it's 20, 30 pages are actually quality. And the thing is, reading it one time isn't going to be a magic flip of the switch and now you're a happier person. It's going to be, you actually need to read it and truly implement the stuff that he's recommending. If it actually is good stuff.
It's so easy to read these books and just like not do anything, right? You're like, oh yeah, okay, I gotta be more grateful. Okay, sounds good. Next page. Now I gotta drink more water. That will make me happier. Right, and you never do any of those things. It's so easy to.
You might go over to like other people and be like, yo, like I heard you guys should be more grateful and drink more water, because that'll probably make you happier. But like, so you basically just because that's what happens a lot of time when you're reading, is you'll maybe be reading and be like, oh, that'll be a good thing I can tell other people about. You know what I mean? And I think that's just like maybe a natural human thing, just being a social people, is that when you find things, you want to relate it to other people. Like you want to think about, oh, how can I bring this to the other people? So I think that's where it comes from, where you'll like read, oh, water's good, I'm going to tell everybody at work that they got to be drinking more water.
Yeah. And
then it puts you up on a bit of a pedestal too, right? Because you're the one who's telling everybody else what to do and how they should be doing things.
Yeah, it's such a self-serving thing. Yeah. I feel like, oh, like I have... I
got the keys.
I got the key to being healthy, whether it's like veganism or whatever. Like everyone tells you about... Like everyone talks about whatever diet they're doing. Right?
Yeah.
It's like such a self-serving thing.
Mm-hmm. And I did want to... We were talking about the judgment stuff. I wanted to say that like... I feel like this one quote I really like from Bruce Lee is know yourself to know others. And for me, the reason that ties into the judgment thing is that I think a lot of a lot of what we assume other people are thinking comes from how we're thinking ourselves. Because obviously you can't really get into the mind of other people. You kind of assume they're thinking in a similar way to you. And if you're the type of person who is looking around and judging everybody else, I feel like you're going to also be far more likely to assume that all these people are judging you. But because you in general assume that what you're thinking is what other people are thinking too.
Yeah.
But if you're the type of person who is not ever judging anybody else, I feel like you're going to be happier for that, because you're going to gain, or you're going to be happy off their happiness. But you're also not going to be assuming that everybody's judging you just because you're like, no, that's not how people's minds operate.
Yeah.
Because mine's not operating like that.
One thing that, like, an application of that exact reasoning that like I recognized was when people like first go to the gym, they think like everyone's going to be judging what they're doing, like how much am I putting up on the barbell.
Yeah.
And when you like start going to the gym more, you start to realize like I am not even paying attention to anyone else here. Like
No.
I couldn't even tell you anything. Sometimes you see like, oh, that guy's big, but I'm never doing the plate math for them, like seeing how much they're putting up.
No.
So it's like, yeah, once you realize that, no, I'm not judging anyone else, therefore no one's judging me here at the gym.
Yeah. And maybe they are, but if you have the mindset that you're not going to judge anybody else, you won't be affected by the judgments. Even if people are judging you, you just don't even consider it, because you're like, no reason to judge anybody.
Yeah.
And when I heard about that, I was like, that's so true. And that's why especially I was saying I want to try to catch myself whenever it does happen, like if you're judging other people, because it happens probably all the time for everybody, really. Like you'll see people wearing certain clothes on Instagram. I'm sure it happens all the time. But by doing all that, it's not good for you. It's not good for anybody, really.
Yeah. One quote that I do like as well was from Julia Louis-Dreyfus, the girl from Seinfeld and Veep.
Yeah.
And she had like a Larry King interview with someone, Larry King, and she said that her key to happiness was two things. She always had something in the short term to look forward to, and something in the long term to look forward to. So something that can get you through your current day.
Right.
At the end of the day, like, hey, I can look forward to going home, having this nice meal.
Yeah.
And in the weekend, like, oh, I'm gonna go and meet up with my friend, and maybe 2 months from now, I have a vacation planned. And having these goals and things to kind of like get you out the door each day, I think are really helpful for me.
Yeah, I could see that, and I could see that for myself too. Or just like, yeah, having something. It comes back to the goal thing. Is you have something that you're pursuing, and day by day or week by week, you see yourself going closer to that goal, and that provides you with a lot of positive emotion in your life.
Yeah. Speaking of goals, like I think it's really important to have tangible goals.
Yeah.
In the past, like I've been going to the gym and I was like, oh, I want to be in shape. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's not very
like
specific.
That's not a clear defined thing. There's lots of shapes, right?
Right.
Being 600 pounds is a shape.
It is one, yeah.
But having a goal of like something that's tangible, like I want to do 20 pull-ups, or like that competition that you did with Jack, the pull-up thing. That was like probably a
Still
big motivation. It's still ongoing over a year. But yeah, like having a goal is really important for these aspects. Like for me, you putting on that 10K was a big goal for me. Like it kind of pushed me when I started running. Like I wanted to be able to perform my best at this certain time on this certain date. So I was able to motivate myself way more, and I found more happiness in having that goal. And when I did well there at that race, it was a great moment for me.
Yeah, and it maybe like leads on to other things, because you gain some more maybe even confidence, or like it's like a little bit of momentum. You get things going. You achieve this. You did well in the race, and then you're like, what's next? And yeah, things are going in a good direction. I did kind of want to bring it back, because I know I brought up this point of kind of going through some of the psychological burdens that you might be carrying along. And that's one thing that I feel like has made me happier, is reflecting on some of the stuff that you might be unconsciously carrying along with you, and then trying to Trying to like go through it all, because there's some points in my life that I might have regretted, felt maybe even guilty about, or been ashamed of. And these things, they don't really just disappear unless you fully kind of work through them and understand them. I don't really want to get into too specifics, because a lot of this stuff that I might have felt bad about, or regretted, involved other people.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there is a key there, is that like any sort of thing, maybe, I guess, trauma. Didn't really want to use that word, but I can't think of a better word to describe it right now. But like, let's say any like trauma that had happened previously in your life, and that can stay with you for a long time. And that, I feel like, is almost like carrying weights along with you everywhere you go. It's like a little bit of extra stress. Your mind's not quite at peace, because there's all these things that you're thinking of, like, oh, why did I do that? Why am I currently doing this? I feel bad about that, and all these kind of troubles that they add additional stress to your life, and in getting them sorted out, and in kind of understanding them better, I feel like is the key to relieving them.
Yeah.
Like, to give an example without giving too many specifics, let's say I did something that I was kind of ashamed of doing, and I was embarrassed that I even had done that thing. I'd done like a fair bit of writing, actually, but basically like just writing out about, like, try to understand the situation to the fullest degree, where like you see who you were when you did that. You see why you did that. What were your motivations? Maybe you realize, oh, I was kind of insecure, or whatever it is, and you really totally understand who you were and what you were doing and why you did that. And that really helps to like forgive yourself, or if it was just an embarrassing thing, you see what it was completely, and that there was nothing you necessarily could have done differently, given who you were and what your goals were at the time. So that really relieves a lot off of your like mental, like it's a mental relief when you do stuff like that.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, I'm Irish, right? And Irish people are known for like taking some trauma and just burying it deep inside for years and years. And then eventually these people that do that, they build up all this stress, and they explode, right?
Yeah.
These people aren't taking the time and reflecting, like, why am I feeling this way? When they have a bad day, they are just grumpy, and then they go to sleep grumpy. They don't take the time to reflect, like, why am I grumpy today?
Yeah.
Why am I feeling bad?
Right.
And it goes back to the Bruce Lee quote, know yourself, right? And that's important for me too. Like, I sometimes recognize, I see myself, I'm like, oh, you know what? Today's not my day. I'm just having a bad day. And if once I'm able to recognize that and maybe pinpoint it to a certain thing, maybe an interaction at work, or maybe I didn't get enough sleep, but like recognizing that I'm having a bad day is important for me, so that I'm not burying these things inside. I'm like coming to understand who I am, improving my relationship with myself.
Right. And yeah, these things do get buried as a bit of probably like a defense thing. They're not comfortable, right, to think about.
Yeah.
And that's why you do bury them. But they occasionally will pop out. And when they do pop out, it's generally not good.
I wish I knew like the stages of grief.
Yeah.
You know, like the denial, and then eventually you go and you accept it. And I feel like a lot of people just like do not want to recognize their own flaws. They're so scared of it. It's hard to deal with. Like, I've lived a lot of my life kind of putting aside my flaws. Like, oh, I am this certain way, and I never took the time to recognize that, oh, like, the reason I am this way is because of this. Like, I've always been I felt like a shy person, and I never really understood why. Right. Like, maybe I'm not like going up to all these people at this, like, I'm not a talkative person in public. And I never realized, like, oh, why am I that way? And then through like COVID, I've had time to reflect on myself, and I realized, like, oh, like I'm an anxious person, and that's why I'm like this way. Yeah. So taking that time to recognize it's not a flaw, it's just a trait of mine that I'm an anxious person, and just being able to recognize, like, okay, this is why I am this way, was so freeing to me. it led to so much more confidence. It let me be myself far more. Like
Right.
that was like a huge thing for me, realizing like, hey, I'm anxious. Like there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
Like obviously there are things, but I feel like some people are just naturally take on more stress or take on more anxiety. And recognizing that for me was very freeing.
Yeah. I
And
feel like
the one thing, like, back to that, like the natural level of stress and anxiety that people take on, I feel like it's kind of in people's nature, right? There was a story I heard about a guy describing one of his coworkers, and he took a lot of time and effort into caring about the Chicago Bulls or whatever sports team it was. He would care a lot about the whatever picks they had, the draft, the season, the playoffs, all this stuff about the Chicago Bulls. They put a lot of their self-worth in this thing. They would stress on it. And then the person grew up and they had a kid, and they started worrying about the kid's grades in school, whether he was getting picked on. But he maintained the same level of stress that he had with the Chicago Bulls to his child. Water found its level. This person had just a natural level of stress. And hearing that, like, oh, I have a natural level of anxiety. It's the same thing. I was able to recognize that in myself, and it was so freeing.
Yeah, and I feel like recognizing it is the first step in kind of relieving it too, right? Like, it's when you are, like, you accepting reality is the key to eventually relieving it. Like, for however long that you're denying the things that you don't want to accept, you're basically just prolonging the suffering. So, like, if you are anxious, or like for me, and yeah, admitting these things really are freeing, and I feel like they provide you a lot of peace mentally, just because if you're able to just say, like, yeah, sometimes maybe I am judging people, but it's something that I want to work on, or sometimes maybe I am anxious, or maybe sometimes, or in the past I've done things that are, that I'm not proud of and whatnot, but you stop denying these things, and you stop denying that they have happened or they are currently happening. That, I feel like, in itself gives you a lot of relief, because you're not hiding from anything. You're just like, this is it, and I accept it, and then you work towards whatever you want to work towards, which for you maybe trying to relieve some of the anxiety or whatever you can do. Like you said, that's a tricky puzzle to solve.
Yeah.
But there's probably some things you can do. But yeah, that for sure is a key, is just stop going against reality. Like, you're never going to win that war, right? If the reality is that you are doing these things and you're continually denying it, that's not a battle you're going to win. The reality will win every time.
Yeah, and like, I think it's a very like admirable pursuit to improve your relationship with yourself. I like, it is a new thing for me to be introspective and try to understand me. Like, there's times where, like, you sometimes you look into the mirror and you're like, do you like the person that you see? And maybe you're not taking the time to recognize some of the positive aspects of yourself, right? Like, it's so easy to be down on yourself and like, oh, like, maybe I'm not the best athlete. It's so easy to find your flaws, and I feel like finding your positive aspects is huge. It improves your confidence so much, and improves your level of happiness in everything. Like, if you, in all aspects of your life, if you find what makes you great, then it improves your performance at like work or interacting with friends. It improves your confidence.
Yeah. And I think happiness, we maybe should have defined or described what we believe is happiness earlier on in the podcast.
Is it?
But the thing, you tell me what you think it is, and maybe you don't think there's a clear definition, but I feel like happiness is the point where you're not really, like, nothing is missing. You're not really thinking too much in the future. You're not thinking too much in the past. It's almost, yeah, you're just content, and you're not wishing you had other stuff. And I feel like that's part of the reason why just accepting all of the things about yourself is a relief, is because you don't feel as if you're missing anything anymore, or as if things need to improve. And well, maybe you want to improve things, but you're not desperate for these things, and you're willing to accept things the way they are.
I think I don't like I don't think there is a definition to happiness because it changes from person to person. Like Webster's can't define what happiness is for everyone, right? From each person it changes. It could be the car, it could be the stroller, it could be being content and peaceful. But it's different from each person. And so that's why it's so hard to find, and that's why there is no key to it. And that's why this pursuit of happiness is so important, making efforts to find it and recognize what makes me happy, whether it's your friends, finance, health. Yeah.
And with the pursuit, the reason at the beginning where I was asking you if you maybe like you found your path to happiness in that Instagram cloud or the money or whatever, is because there are certain paths or certain pursuits that I feel like are a bit of a trap, where you might you have the expectation that the Lamborghini, or once you get 1 million followers on Instagram, then you're gonna find the happiness, but it's generally not really the case.
No.
And the thing is, there's a lot of temptations for things like that. Like you're gonna get pulled, and advertising for sure does this, where they'll maybe promise happiness if you do certain things. But yeah, I find it's really gonna come down to, like, nothing external is really gonna provide you with much happiness, or at least prolonged happiness. Obviously, you get that Lamborghini, you're pumped for a few days or whatever, but the true, like, more like prolonged peace, maybe what I was describing was more like peace, where you just feel content and nothing, you don't need anything. That I feel like is gonna come more from the introspection and the internal evaluations of yourself.
Yeah, there is like a lot of external things that make me happy. I find like some friends I have just like know the right thing to say to me to make me happy.
Right.
And it's that is an external thing. It's not coming from someone else. I remember one time I was having a really bad day. I woke up and I was just down on myself, not feeling good, and I just got out of the blue a text message from someone saying like, "Hey, I've missed you like throughout COVID. I think you're great. I can't wait to hang out next time." And that was such a moment of relief for me.
Right.
It instantly changed my day, and it was an external thing. I probably, without this text message, would have moped around for the rest of the day. But this external factor, paradigm shift for my outlook on not just the day, but probably the week. It like was such a huge thing. Yeah. That is like something that you can get from someone else, and I think it's important to surround yourself with people that make you happy. Yeah. It isn't a solo endeavor. It's not. You can do it by yourself, obviously, but if you have people around you that do support you and are like loving, it makes it so much easier, I find.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. And I'm not trying to say that external things won't give you any happiness, but I feel like the more like prolonged happiness will come from some of the more internal pursuits, because the external things will come and go. And let's say for a few weeks you don't get any of those text messages, then you're relying more on yourself. And that's why, like, obviously, like we were saying, the relationships is a key leg for the happiness stool. But I think that the internal stuff maybe provides you with a good baseline level where you won't dip as far down when the external things disappear.
Yeah,
and because they aren't as predictable.
It is important too, like that internal happiness, being content with yourself, having self-respect, loving yourself is important. Just so, like you said, you don't get that text message, you can maintain a certain level of happiness. You shouldn't have to rely on others to make you happy. It's important to be happy with yourself, improving your internal pursuits, as you say.
Yeah, and that stuff is like awesome though. Like when you do get a text like that, and what I mean by that is just some people, I feel like there might be a hesitancy. Maybe you do miss somebody, but you're like, I don't know, they're gonna like think this is weird or whatever if I send them a message. But then almost every time, if you ever do get that message, you're like, oh, that's awesome. Thanks for like thinking about me or whatever. But there's always that hesitancy, and to know that people genuinely do appreciate it a lot of the time. Hopefully more people feel comfortable with just firing off those messages
Exactly.
or whatever.
I feel like there's times where like, oh, I think about someone, like, oh, I want to reach out. I want to let them know, like, hey, like, you're sick. I think you're great.
Yeah.
Just like kind of pump their tires. But I don't want to like burden them with a text message like, oh, I got to respond to Shane. But, yo, it's going to make them happy. Just fire it off. Like, why not?
Yeah, why not?
Because I love receiving them. So I should be sending them out to other people. Like, it's like you want to be the change you want to see in the world. If I want to receive more of these messages, I want to get my tires pumped a bit more. Maybe I should start pumping my friends' tires a bit.
Right, and it probably comes down to like how often it's happening. Like if you're firing off those bombs every day,
like every day, like, hey, Ollie, what's up?
Yeah, the significance kind of goes down a bit. You're like, all right, I get it. But one thing, we'll wrap it up soon. It's just past an hour now. But I did want to bring up, because this is one thing that I find one of the more like internal things that I feel like can improve your life happiness is being aware of your desires. Because I really like this quote I heard one time that was, desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get the thing that you're desiring. So if you want things, if you want a Lamborghini, or like if you want a new shirt, by wanting that stuff, you're essentially setting yourself up internally to be slightly not okay because you don't have that thing yet.
Yeah, like I am not complete until I have this thing.
Yeah, and that's why watching out for your desires, to realize how many things am I currently desiring I have, because you can be desiring a lot of things, and each one of them will give you a little bit of unhappiness or discontent. But they're not even all achievable, especially not all immediately and not all at once. Like you might be, let's say you're scrolling on Instagram and you see somebody hiking in the Gatineau Mountains or Gatineau Hills, and you're like, oh man, I wish I was doing that. I want to be hiking in the Gatineau Hills. And you scroll down to another picture below, you see somebody like from at the club, and you're like, oh, I want to be at the club. And then like you scroll down to the next picture, and you're like, you see somebody traveling in Europe, and you're like, man, I should be traveling more. Now all of a sudden you want all these things. You want to be in 3 places at once, and you can't even go to even one of those places.
Yeah.
And I really noticed this one time when I was driving to work on the weekend, and I didn't really want to be there, but I had to like quickly realize, look, I was like, I wanted to like maybe like hang out with some people. I also wanted to just like relax, but I also wanted to go to work in a sense, because I knew I had to finish up something, and I'd be kind of screwed on Monday if I didn't come in. So now, as I'm driving there, I'm like, I don't want to do this. I want to be hanging out with those people. I want to be like chilling. It's the weekend, and I'm wanting all these things. But then I realized, like, no, you just got to let go of the things, and you got to pick, like, oftentimes pick 1 or maybe 2 desires and go fulfill those, but drop the rest, because they're just providing you with some unnecessary stress, because you want these things, and you realistically, if you prioritize your desires, you're not going to go for them, and you can't have all of them right now. So it's like a patience thing and a managing of desires, in the sense that you just pick a select few and you really go after those, because it's natural. You're going to have desires. You're going to have goals. You're going to have things you want to achieve, but you can't do them all. And by wanting all of them, you're making yourself unhappy.
Yeah. Instead of having like many holes to fill, like having those like very limited ones that can push you forward each day. And I think that's a good way to send it off, is have like a singular, maybe dual focus on some aspects of your life that you want to improve. Just so, because you don't want to bring yourself down, right? Like if you have all these things that you want to achieve, it's like you said, you're making yourself feel inadequate. And yeah, it was wonderful to be on.